bloodstream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the dominant force of Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us, also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, before we get started, just want to let people know Bill Belichick did it again. And for those who are talking about Tom Brady didn't do jack. The New England Patriots put up 13 points. However, Bill Belichick held the Los Angeles Rams, one of the more potent offenses in the NFL this season, to 3 points in the biggest game of the year. Tom Brady had nothing to do with that. So that's why I say Bill Belichick did it again. Enough of that. Moving on to our first topic. Spartacus enters the arena. Cory Booker, the junior senator from New Jersey, has decided that it's time for him to run for president. CBS took an in-depth look at it and filed this report back on the 1st of February regarding the good Senator Booker.
New Jersey Senator Cory Booker is joining the 2020 presidential race. He's joining an already very crowded field, which includes former Obama administration official Julian Castro, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, Senator Kamala Harris, and former Representative John Delaney. Senators Elizabeth Warren and Kristen Gillibrand have also said that they're considering a run, along with the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Pete Buttigieg. Senator Booker is a Stanford grad and Rhodes Scholar. He entered the national stage through social media during his time as mayor of Newark. Well, for more, Michael Aaron is the chief political correspondent for NJTV and joins us now. So, Michael, what did you make of today's announcement? Was this pretty much something we were expecting?
Well, we're still anticipating the formal announcement, which he's doing in front of his home here in Newark. But he did put out a video this morning at 7 a.m. that's very slickly produced. I would say it identifies Booker as in the vanguard of modern politicians, just the way it's produced. It's quite unusual. It's got a little bit of jazz to it, a little bit of documentary history. It's a good first rollout for Booker. We're not surprised that it's happening. People have been saying all his life that someday he'd run for president.
Mm-hmm. And, top White House aide Kellyanne Conway was asked how the president felt about Booker's decision to run. I want to play for you some of what she said this morning.
The president said before that Cory Booker, as mayor of Newark, ran the, quote, city into the ground, so I'll let those comments stand. I saw in his, I think Cory Booker often sounds like a Hallmark card and not necessarily a person who's there to tell you everything he's accomplished in the United States Senate and as mayor of Newark.
Fair assessment, Michael?
Well, the part about running Newark into the ground is not true. Newark is experiencing a renaissance. A lot of the credit is going to the current mayor, Ras Baraka, but certainly the prior mayor deserves some credit for laying the groundwork for this new day, as they like to call it. As far as the other comment, it's always dogged Booker that people say he's more of a show horse than a workhorse. He's a tremendous performer, and he's got the gift of gab. He's an orator. If that's Kellyanne Conway's idea of somebody who's thin in terms of substance, so be it. I think he's going to show in the months ahead that he's more than just talk.
He definitely has that it factor when you meet him in person, that quality that people talked about Bill Clinton had, President Obama had. But when you look at his policies, what are some of his great successes when he was serving in Congress or as mayor of Newark?
Well, the whole Newark turnaround, attracting $100 million in Facebook charitable donations, the creation of charter schools, that's part of his legacy here in Newark. Nationally, he's associated with criminal justice reform, and he casts himself as bipartisan, willing and able to work with Republicans. I think it was Senator Mike Lee, whom he worked with, a Republican, to get criminal justice reform done, and that bill was signed by President Trump about a month ago.
You mentioned President Trump. He's been very critical of the president. Will that help him greatly move ahead in this Democratic Party?
I think so. I think the Democratic field is largely critical of Trump, and somebody is going to have to emerge from that field and actually take on Trump, assuming he is still president and running for re-election. So Booker has really been pretty harsh on Trump in many respects, rhetorically. If the Democratic Party is looking for someone who can hurl insults at Trump the way Trump hurls insults at some Democrats, Booker will fill that bill.
Michael Aaron, grateful you could join us. Michael, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Well, clearly a fan of Mr. Booker's, the gentleman from NJ.TV. Interesting. He didn't mention anything about the fact that murder, violent crime, unemployment, and taxes all rose dramatically under Cory Booker during his time as mayor. And to talk about charter schools and how that's a good thing for a Democrat, I'm not sure that the Democrat Party has a positive view of the charter school movement. Here's the long story short is Cory Booker's never done anything that really mattered for anyone politically, except perhaps himself. Now, recently during the Kavanaugh hearings for Supreme Court, he, quite frankly, embarrassed himself, saying things that were just simply crazy. And it was captured in a manner that really brings out just how comical it was, because he actually put himself so it would seem in jeopardy of possibly being expelled from the Senate until you find out that that was, like most other things in his political career, a hoax.
We're holding back, not only holding back documents, labeling committee confidential, and I'm releasing it to expose that, number one, the emails that are being withheld from the public have nothing to do with national security.
Shame on my colleagues if they conceal them now.
I understand that the penalty comes with potential ousting from the Senate. I'm releasing committee confidential documents.
Mr. Chairman, here's the interesting piece of that. That email, those emails, had already been cleared for release by the committee.
Several other documents that were supposedly, quote-unquote, committee confidential were released by Democrats Thursday morning, but it turns out, as I understand it, they were actually pre-cleared for public release.
This is about the closest I'll probably ever have in my life to an I am Spartacus moment.
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
The senators, at least, were leading people to believe that they were releasing this against the will of the Republicans. What was then revealed was that, in fact, Republicans had looked at all these documents and prepared to release them, and they were eventually released.
The information that he was talking about had actually already been made publicly available.
Late Wednesday night, GOP Senator Mike Lee vowed to work with Booker to get the documents released, even walking across the room to shake on it. Just after 11 a.m. this morning, Booker released 4 documents via email and Twitter and said this about Cornyn.
I think he was just like most bullies are, a lot of talk and no action.
Wondering if the documents were actually those Lee had worked with Booker to release.
If you don't care about classified information read in front of the entire nation, and the rules don't matter to you, even when you can't even violate those rules the right way, out of a stunning amount of incompetence.
That is irresponsible and outrageous, and I hope that the senator will reconsider his decision, because no senator deserves to sit on this committee or serve in the Senate, in my view, if they decide to be a law unto themselves and willingly flout the rules of the Senate and the determination of confidentiality and classification. That is irresponsible and conduct unbecoming a senator.
A short time later, Senate Judiciary Committee staffers told reporters that the documents in question had indeed been cleared by 4 a.m. and that Senators Blumenthal, Booker, Coons, and Leahy had been notified shortly thereafter.
Mr. Kavanaugh has been on the circuit court for 12 years. He has a voluminous record, 307 opinions that he's written. I don't know, that's 10 or 15,000 pages of writings that he's done. Is the best record that other people have said. So I'm going to agree with them. It's the best way of knowing whether or not they should be on the Supreme Court.
So Cory Booker did a grandstand maneuver back in September because he knew he wanted to run for president. And he also knew that he had done nothing in the Senate and had done nothing as the mayor of Newark, New Jersey, that would set him apart. So being able to say that he had grandstanded, that he had stood up for the people and stood up against corruption in the Senate and secrecy and stood up against Donald Trump's nominee when he did nothing of the kind. I'm going to release confidential documents. Well, you didn't release them before they were cleared. And by the time they were cleared, they were, of course, no longer confidential. You knew this because you wanted to grandstand, because you have no agenda. Well, what about criminal justice reform? Kim Kardashian has more to do with criminal justice reform and the law that has come out than Cory Booker. Let's just put it out there. Cory Booker is nobody. And he's never been anybody. That's the whole problem. Here is another problem that's going to get him blown out of this race, or should get him blown out of the race for the Democrat nomination. And it's his ambiguity on manhood itself. He is supposedly a man running for president, but according to this August 2013 CNN report, when he was running for the Senate, you kind of call that into question.
When the candidates for the Senate seat from New Jersey face the cameras, it's not just the economy or education up for debate, but what it means to be a real man.
It's just disheartening to hear somebody in this day and age in the United States of America basically implicate that gay men are not men, that they're not guys.
That's Cory Booker, Newark's mayor and New Jersey's Democratic candidate for Senate. It came after Republican challenger Steve Lonegan spoke out about comments Booker made to the Washington Post. Booker, who is single, telling the paper he had not found a life partner. Also saying, I love seeing on Twitter when someone says I'm gay. And I say, so what does it matter if I am? So be it. I hope you're not voting for me because you are making the presumption that I'm straight. Lonegan's response?
Maybe that helps to get him the gay vote by acting ambiguous.
And he said this about an earlier comment Booker made that a girlfriend got him hooked on pedicures.
It was described as his peculiar fetish is how it was described. I have a more peculiar fetish. I like a good scotch and a cigar.
The thought that what defines manhood is the drink that you drink or the cigar that you smoke. I think that he just really misses the boat on what it means to be a man in America.
Booker also took to Twitter, responding to a critic who questioned his sexuality, saying, your bigotry is no less heinous than race bigotry. Lonegan clarifying his position during a press conference today.
This election is not about, validating Cory Booker's lifestyle. I don't care if Cory Booker is gay or straight. Problem is, he's too liberal for New Jersey.
His earlier comments still a concern for gay rights advocates like Troy Stevenson.
To have a public official, somebody that's running for the United States Senate, to tell them that there is a way they have to behave to be considered a real man, it's shocking.
For now, the man leading the latest polling is Booker by nearly 30 percentage points.
Thank you.
Booker is going to win easily. At some point, he'll have to clarify, and certainly if he runs for president. That's a completely different ocean as opposed to the pond of the Senate race.
And, of course, Booker has not clarified. He's been a vegetarian since I believe it was 2012, and he's been a vegan since 2014. He doesn't eat meat. He won't let anybody know whether or not he's gay or straight. Homosexual or heterosexual. I hate those other terms. He hasn't found a lifelong partner and definitely doesn't seem to be a woman, but a woman turned him on to his peculiar fetish of pedicures. If you really believe that the American people want another homosexual, because that's what Barack Obama was, or is, to serve as president, at least Barack Obama had the decency not to almost parade his lack of maleness around. We're talking about an androgynous buffoon in Cory Booker. What does he do? He grandstands. What has he done? He's done nothing. What did he do for Newark, New Jersey? Well, he saw murder, violent crime, unemployment, and taxes all go up while he was mayor. And then they elect that guy as a senator. This is the same guy who admitted back when he was clear that he was heterosexual, that he had his own sexual assault moment in high school, I guess it was, where he was grabbing some girl's breast trying to kiss her. Look, there's nothing to this guy. Why he's running? It's real simple. The Democrat Party needs a stooge as president. They need a stooge because they can't get Hillary Clinton. The people who want Clinton as president, they know they can't get her. And Hillary is no stooge. Hillary is a soldier for progressivism and globalism. All you got to do is put a quarter in her slot and she knows what to do. But the rest of these people, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Garden Tool Harris, Cory Spartacus Booker, Julian Castro, Tulsi Gabbard, whom nobody's even heard of, they're looking for someone who can be easily manipulated by folks that they fear. And Cory Booker fits the bill. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin'. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us, also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Okay, let's spend some time on this Ralph Northam nonsense, governor of Virginia. We have a 1984 yearbook photo. Can't really tell what's in it, but it's on a page it's on a yearbook page that is headed with his name, and it shows two people, apparently both of them white. At least you can tell that one of them is white. It's not a great quality photograph. One is in blackface and the other is in full KKK garb, hood and robe. So, that blew up over the weekend, and CNN covered the story with a full panel, as they normally do, on things of concern to them, and this is how that came out.
A scandal erupting over the Democratic governor of Virginia. Virginia's Republican Party says he should resign if he's one of the people shown in a page from his 1984 medical school yearbook. The picture shows two people. You can see it right there, one in blackface and another in a Ku Klux Klan robe and hood. Bring back our legal and political analysts. Laura, what do you think of this? This is if it's him, it's a pretty big scandal out there.
If it's him in blackface, it's a problem. If it's him in the Klan, it's a problem. If it's him just pictures with his friends, it's a problem. And it's a particularly bad problem because we haven't heard a word from him. I don't know how long this has been up yet, but at least since this afternoon. And it's been radio silent from his camp. And he's going to need to say something pretty soon. But there's probably not that much that he can say to explain this. It's his medical school yearbook. He was an adult. There's not really much he can do here. And he's going to be in a really tough spot.
You know, David, and take a look at the page. It's got his name on the top of that yearbook page from Eastern Virginia Medical School back in 1984. And as Laura says, we don't have a statement from him yet.
Not yet, which is really surprising. I mean, this has been several hours now that a Virginia political blog first put this up, that we haven't heard from them. In fact, we also haven't heard from some other big Virginia Democratic players because they're waiting to see what Ralph Northam has to say. So there's just been this radio silence kind of thing going on right now. 1984, 25 years old. As you're saying, Laura, I've been spending the last several hours while we haven't heard from him yet thinking through, what could he possibly say in this scenario if he is one of those two people depicted in that photo that is in any way going to be acceptable to people in Virginia? I think you can't just, it's going to be very hard to dismiss this as just a youthful medical school folly. This is going to be a real problem.
And this, the state Republican Party has already called for him to step down.
Yep.
And we haven't heard anything from the official Democratic Party at this point. Again, as you're pointing out, everybody wants to hear what Northam says. But, Kellyanne Conway has a very interesting tweet, which I think plays into this. And she says, this should be easier work than parsing every word and semicolon in the Kavanaugh yearbook. So remember that. Remember the Kavanaugh yearbook in which we did parse everything. This is a picture. It's not so difficult to parse. You just have to figure out who was under those costumes. And I don't see how Northam says it wasn't me, given the fact that the whole page is pictures of him.
And he presumably chose it. It's his yearbook.
Right.
It's not a surprise what's in your yearbook.
And you kind of wonder why this didn't come out during the campaign, and Ed Gillespie didn't have it.
Underneath the picture, it's an awful picture. There's a quote that's on that yearbook page. It says, there are more old drunks than old doctors in this world, so I think I'll have another beer.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of this situation here, not to be trite, but I just think there's no gray area. And if you're a Democrat, I don't think you can come forward and defend this. It's not a good look to be defending blackface or the KKK in any way. And it's not just that this story came out this afternoon. I'm sure, per normal journalistic practices, they went to Northam's camp this morning, maybe even yesterday, to say, what is this picture? Is this you? Do you have a comment? And it's been radio silence. So I don't know, I haven't touched base with the Northam camp yet, but it's inexcusable.
And the irony here is the Democratic Party, Rebecca was just talking about the diversity in the field, and the party has been celebrating women candidates, African-American candidates from all parts of the country, and look at us, we're a great diverse party. And then this happens in Virginia, and it's like a human speed bump here. And so the party has to speak out about this. I know they're waiting for Northam, but as you say, it's not a good look. It's worse than that. Where are you?
Let's not forget he beat Ed Gillespie, the Republican, for the gubernatorial contest in Virginia, 54% to 45% in the 2017 election. And a lot of people are already wondering, didn't anybody go from the Republican side look at his yearbook?
Especially after Kavanaugh. I demand my money back.
Right.
I'm finding this a little bit funny. I'll get to why it's funny in a minute. But there you have it. There's a picture out there. It's in a yearbook in 1984. Somehow it got missed through all of his public office work, through his military career, etc., so on. Nobody saw this photo apparently until this weekend. And Northam eventually, I think it was the same day, yes, it was the same day of that CNN panel report, he issued an apology, and here is a salient part of his statement. This is Governor Northam.
That photo and the racist and offensive attitudes it represents does not reflect that person I am today or the way that I have conducted myself as a soldier, a doctor, and a public servant. I am deeply sorry. I cannot change the decisions I made, nor can I undo the harm my behavior caused then and today. but I accept responsibility for my past actions, and I am ready to do the hard work of regaining your trust.
Let me say why that statement bothers me. It's not because of him talking about the photo and apologizing. You know, that's pretty standard fare. It doesn't mean anything, but it is expected and it's standard fare. You have to get this done. So I'm like, okay, fine. What bothers me is now everyone is considering him a racist. However, they can't point to anything that he's done other than this photo from 35 years ago. You can't tell me anything intervening where you would actually think that he's a racist. It's just we need to purge somebody who 35 years ago has a photo in a yearbook that you really can't tell whether it's him or not. You can conclude that it might be him, or at least he had something to do with it, but you can't come to that conclusion. But what you don't do is remember that in 2013, during the race for lieutenant governor of Virginia, which he did win, he ran against Bishop E.W. Jackson. And there was a debate on television, the newsroom, news studio type of debate. They were sitting next to each other. When I say next to each other, I'm talking about their shoulders could touch. I'm talking about close enough to, as though they were seated at the same table at dinner on the same side of the table. And at the end of the debate, Bishop Jackson reached over to shake hands with Ralph Northam, who not only did not shake his hand, he did not even acknowledge Bishop Jackson's presence. Didn't even turn his head, stared straight ahead. Bishop Jackson is actually tapping him. He reaches his hand over and then taps him so that he might take his hand and shake it. And Northam acts as though the man isn't there. Now, where was all the... I hate to say this, but see, what happened 6 years ago or 5.5 years ago tells me a whole lot more about whether or not someone is racist than a picture that you can't tell they're in from 35 years ago. But that's not what they're calling out because, oh, that's right, Bishop E.W. Jackson, since he wasn't a Democrat, must be a coon, must be an Uncle Tom, must be something like that, and therefore he deserves to be treated like something stuck to the bottom of a white progressive shoe. We get that. But if he wasn't a racist in 2013 when he snubbed a black pastor who offered a handshake, then how does he become a racist for what happened in 1984? I don't get that. Oh, by the way, after that apology, he had a change of heart. This is Governor Northam again.
Virginia Governor Ralph Northam says it wasn't him in that racist photo from his med school yearbook.
I believe then and now that I am not either of the people in that photo.
You're saying that you had no idea this racist photo existed before it surfaced less than 24 hours ago?
That's correct. I was in the United States Army while I was in medical school. I was doing rotations out of the state. I had nothing to do with the preparation of the yearbook, nor did I buy one.
It's a reversal for the Virginia Democrat who less than 24 hours ago apologized for appearing in the picture.
That photo and the racist and offensive attitudes it represents does not reflect that person I am today. I'm deeply sorry.
Today, Northam alluded to other actions in his past, saying in 1984 he won a dance contest where he wore dark shoe polish on his face as part of a Michael Jackson costume.
I didn't personally find it as unacceptable at that time. I had learned since, again, in talking to my friend Seth. The picture, though, that is in the EVMS yearbook with the black facing and the member of the KKK is just horrific.
Despite Northam's defiance, A long list of people now calling for him to step down. Virginia's Legislative Black Caucus, the state's Democratic Party, Democratic candidates for president, and the Democratic National Committee.
Thank you so much, guys.
If Northam were to leave office, 39-year-old Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax would become the second black governor in Virginia's history. And in a statement tonight, the lieutenant governor issued a statement saying that he was glad Northam apologized, but he stopped short of calling for the governor to step down. Now, Northam says he'll revisit his decision to stay in office if he feels he's unable to effectively govern.
If he feels... Oh, wow. There's another report out that, in Washington Post, the Virginian pilot, WUSA, that he has called an impromptu meeting with his staff to determine what his course of action should be. He's already said earlier on Sunday he wasn't going to resign, but now he has decided he's going to call a meeting and to look at all his options, including resignation. This is hilarious to me. Of course, the NAACP, which had nothing to say when the white lieutenant governor candidate would not even shake hands with a black lieutenant governor candidate in Virginia. Now, of course, they want his resignation. But you know what the interesting thing is to me about this? The worst thing that you guys can say about this dude is he's a racist. Really? After what they did in Virginia to abortion, or tried to do with abortion in Virginia, if you weren't aware of that, and what Northam had to say about that, CBS News, which is actually doing a passable job of late seeking to be objective, I'm not going to call them objective, they actually reported on this back on the 31st of January.
Virginia's governor today responded to critics after a move by Democrats to ease restrictions on late-term abortions ignited an intense debate. Ed O'Keefe tells us what is at stake.
Anti-abortion rights activists were in the crowd this afternoon as Virginia's Democratic Governor Ralph Northam said outrage over a Democratic-sponsored abortion bill was unfounded.
We're here to set the record straight. Virginia Democrats are on the side of ensuring women have access to the health care they need.
The bill failed this week in the state legislature. It dealt with abortions in the third trimester, which are currently legal in Virginia if 3 doctors determine the life or health of the mother is at risk. Under the proposed law, only 1 doctor's approval would be necessary, among other changes. On Monday, the bill's sponsor, Democratic delegate Kathy Tran, sparked the controversy when she was asked by a Republican lawmaker if her bill would allow an abortion even while a woman was in labor.
My bill would allow that, yes.
Tran said today that she misspoke. Yesterday, Northam had tried defending her, but drew national attention when he said abortion could be considered even during birth if the baby suffered severe abnormalities.
And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mothers.
Northam, a pediatric neurologist, says his comments were misinterpreted. But conservatives pounced.
Let's be really clear about what we're talking about here. We're talking about 4th trimester abortion, or what anyone in the normal world calls infanticide.
And President Trump called Democrats the party of late-term abortion, adding that the latest controversy is going to lift up the whole pro-life movement like maybe it's never been lifted up before. But polls show that for most Americans, abortion doesn't rank as a top-tier issue. And House Speaker Nancy Pelosi today appeared to want no part of the debate.
I'm sorry, I just don't know what he said yesterday. I just don't know.
State governments regularly consider abortion legislation. Just last week, New York passed an expansive abortion rights law similar to what was proposed in Virginia. Several other states are considering bills that would restrict or expand abortion rights. Jeff?
All right, Ed O'Keefe, thank you very much.
Let's begin here with the blatant lie that abortion is not a big issue with most Americans. There are at least half the states in the union who are stepping up their restrictions on abortion. If you think that happens and the people don't care, or they're not paying attention, or it is not a priority for them, you are fooling yourself. And you'll notice that Nancy Pelosi wanted no part of it. I still know what he said. No, she's lying, but Nancy Pelosi always lies. The point is, I don't want to say anything about that because it's bad enough. I know what's going on in Virginia, and the last thing I want to do is say anything and bring any of that heat in my direction. I just don't know what happened. Yeah, sure you don't. But let me break all this down in ways that reasonable people, quote unquote, can understand. First of all, I don't live in Virginia, so I have the luxury of not giving a rat's behind who the governor is. And second, I've been listening to people or reading people on social media particularly inventing some moral equivalence between Ralph Northam and Brett Kavanaugh. That is obscene. There were lies told about Brett Kavanaugh's past, and they sent those after him after he'd spent 12 years as a circuit judge, a federal judge, and had a record that was pretty stellar. The truth of Northam's past, at least the picture, it just caught up with him. So someone sent lies from the past after Kavanaugh, and the truth from the past found Northam. How will you get that? The only equivalence that you have here isn't moral. In both cases, someone dug up something from a man's distant past trying to ruin his future. That's the only equivalence there is. That said, anyone who can't see the difference between a man like Kavanaugh, Brett Kavanaugh, he's accused of sexual harassment. How come all of his law clerks are female? How come he had all those women standing up behind him when he was being attacked, demonstrating for him? Everything, really? Come on now. Who's standing up for Northam right now? Anybody? Didn't think so. If you can't tell the difference between Ralph Northam and Brett Kavanaugh regarding what manner of man they are, then you don't have the sense God gave roadkill. Now, all that said, if Ralph Northam lets folks bully him out of elected office over something that happened 35 years ago, which proves nothing, can't say that, well, what did he do that was racist? He took a picture. Really? He took a picture 35 years ago? If you let somebody bully you out of office for that, you're not a man. You're a Democrat, but you're not a man. And if you lie about it, which it sounds kind of like he's trying to do, to stay in office, if you lie to stay in office, then you're an even worse human being than people think you are. And after this broadcast, I'm done with this topic. I don't give a rat's behind. I'm less concerned with whether some white guy doesn't like black people than I am with whether or not he thinks it's okay to kill black people in the womb. Because do not forget, per capita in this country, blacks kill the most unborn children of anyone. And any laws, any change in laws anywhere that makes that easier simply means more black children will die. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinkin', we'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, talkamericaradio.us, also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of this first hour. You will recall when the government was quote-unquote reopened, President Trump said he would do it for 3 weeks until February 15th. Well, we are now 1 week into that negotiation, and Fox Business News ran a story to say where we were on the state of all that.
All right, let's get to immigration. President Trump tweeting about the border wall funding battle. Here it is. Large sections of wall have already been built, with much more either under construction or ready to go. Renovation of existing walls is also a very big part of the plan to finally, after many decades, properly secure our border. The wall is getting done, one way or the other. Meanwhile, the Democrats reportedly still will not give a dime for wall funding. Daniel Garza is back with us. He's with the Libra Initiative. Daniel, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Mr. Barney. A pleasure.
You've been at White House meetings about border wall funding.
Yes.
You're meeting, I think it's Jared Kushner.
Jared Kushner, yes.
He's quarterbacking the negotiations?
I believe he's point on driving the negotiations and the discussions with respect to hammering out some kind of solution, both on the DACA issue and maybe even the border security issue.
So what did you get from Jared Kushner? Is the president ready to deal?
He is. I think there's an openness, right, to receive a counteroffer. I think right now during this 3 weeks of negotiation, they are open to what the other side has to offer and negotiate. I think what they're trying to achieve is that both sides don't look weaker on the other side of this. They want to be strengthened, and there's a way to do this. There is a bipartisan solution. Permanency for the DACA kids, and then the president receives his funding request of $5.7 billion.
It's kind of obvious, isn't it?
It's obvious.
Yes. The main. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm going to be in my bonnet about this, but the main deal is those young people who are brought here and who've been here for years and years and years. They're dreamers. Surely there's some mechanism whereby we can get them to stay, everything's fine, but that Mr. Trump gets his wall. Isn't that the obvious deal?
Well, the best thing about this is that America wins, right? We enhance border security and we strengthen, the border areas, of course. That's good for America. And at the same time, then we incorporate these young children with vast capacities who can contribute to our economy. And then, of course, they can plan their futures and their destinies. The educators, where the schools and the universities that they go to. And then, of course, their employers can now plan their future as well. This is good for America.
Is Jared Kushner, acting for the president, is he prepared to accept? Did he get any hint that he would accept that kind of deal? You get the dream.
Well, it's interesting because, I insisted that and the end game includes some kind of permanency because we don't want to be here 3 years later having the same divisions and same discussions. And he reminded us that it was the president who, in last year's State of the Union, who had offered up citizenship for 1.8 million of the Dreamer community, which is different than the DACA community, right? Yeah. So he is he saw some openness there, and I appreciated that very much. And so hopefully the other side can counteroffer and negotiate in good faith. And we're seeing that right now. That they've gotten the negotiations underway. We have a bipartisan group on the House side and a bipartisan group on the Senate side that are now reconciling their differences, trying to arrive at a solution.
The solution is there.
It's absolutely there.
The deal is there.
And it's good for America.
Come on, Mrs. Speaker. Come on. Daniel Garza, thank you very much, sir.
Barney,
great stuff. Thank you.
Let's be clear about something. Democrats don't give a rat's behind about the Dreamers or DACA community or whatever you want to call it. Remember, they were given 6 months to come up with a deal. All they had to do was sit down with Republicans, and they said, hey, Trump said, I'll sign it. Give me something that you guys can agree to, and I'll sign it. The Democrats couldn't agree on anything. They're not going to agree on anything. If they couldn't do it in 6 months, they're not going to do it in 3 weeks. So the idea that that is a bargaining chip, it's something they've already rejected. And the whole idea, oh, well, if you give them that, we'll get money for the wall. And yeah, really? Here's what Nancy Pelosi said the same day that Fox was having that gentleman on to talk about the progress of negotiations.
There's not going to be any wall money in the legislation. However, if they have some suggestions about certain localities where technology, some infrastructure, as I said, about the ports of entry. We might need more ports of entry. We might need some roads. That's part of the negotiation. It is not a negotiation for the president to say. What did he say today? It doesn't matter what Congress does. I knew that he wanted it all to himself. I mean, oh, really? A president who wants to have Congress be completely irrelevant in how we meet the needs of the American people? No, come on.
How about a speaker who didn't care how the government dealt with the American people? Maybe you recall this. We have to pass the bill before we can see what's in it. How is that meeting the needs of the American people? It never was. And you got the whole thing. Well, see, I knew he wanted it to himself. Her issue is not whether or not the country does well. Her issue is whether or not she gets credit. And if she's not going to get credit, she doesn't give a rat's behind. So I have this one guy who's sitting there meeting with Jared Kushner, and they're saying, oh, yeah, we're making progress. We're getting something. Everybody's bringing something to the table. And Nancy's made it very clear. You can bring anything you want, but you ain't getting a dime for the wall. You're not getting a penny for the wall. There's not going to be a wall. She's made it clear because for her, the wall means Trump wins. And no matter what else happens in her mind, Trump can't win. Let me make sure you understand just how committed Democrats are to defeating Donald Trump. That's all they care about. Don't get it twisted. That's all they care about. Back on the 24th of January, while the shutdown, the partial shutdown, was still ongoing, there was a bill that was brought up in the Senate that was intended to do one thing and one thing only. It did not bring money to the wall. It did not deal with border security. It did not deal with immigration. It didn't do any of that. It did one thing, and it was opposed. Here's how that went down.
Senator from Texas.
Madam President, I rise to strongly support the senator from Alaska and the senator from Louisiana and the senator from Mississippi. We should pay our Coast Guard. It is not right that we aren't paying the Coast Guard. Right now, every other military branch is being paid. The Army's being paid, the Navy's being paid, the Air Force is being paid, the Marines are being paid, but the Coast Guard is not being paid, even as they're risking their lives. Many of us in Texas and along the Gulf Coast saw the incredible heroism of the Coast Guard in the wake of Hurricane Harvey, where so many brave men and women risked their lives to save thousands upon thousands of innocents. They should be paid. And, Madam President, I think it's important for the American people to understand what just happened here because it is highly consequential. It is easy for things to get lost in procedural gobbledygook. To assume, well, this is some back and forth about the shutdown, about the wall, has nothing to do with any of that. What Senator Kennedy asked, he brought forward a bill to pay the Coast Guard. It did nothing else. Didn't address any aspect of the shutdown, didn't address any aspect of the wall. It simply said, let's pay the men and women of the Coast Guard, yes or no. That means you can be a yes on that, whether you think we need to secure the border and have a steel barrier, or whether you support open borders. It doesn't say anything either way. It just says the men and women of the Coast Guard deserve paychecks. We could have passed that right here today, and there's one reason and one reason only we didn't, because the Democratic leader stood up and said, I object. And I would note that if there are Democrats on the Democratic side of the aisle that are not comfortable with that, who agree that the Coast Guard should be paid, let me encourage my Democratic colleagues to say so, because it is their party's leader who has lodged an objection on behalf of effectively every Democratic senator. And what they are doing, the Democrats are fond of using the phrase hostage-taking. They are quite literally holding the men and women of the Coast Guard hostage because they want to win a political victory against the president. Their objective here is have the president back down and have not a single mile of border wall built. Never mind that the Democratic leader and every Democrat in this chamber in 2013 voted to build and fund 350 miles of border wall. 350 miles every Democrat in this chamber voted for. We're in a shutdown today because they are now unwilling to fund 234 miles of border wall, less than they voted for in 2013. Now, we understand politics rears its head in this business, and the Democrats want to defeat the president politically, and so the substance is secondary to trying to get that partisan victory over the president. But let me suggest this ought to be an issue. We can keep fighting back and forth on whether securing the border or having open borders is a good idea. But this ought to be an issue that should be real simple. Senator Kennedy brought forward a clean bill that does one thing and one thing only. It pays the salaries of the Coast Guard. If the Democratic leader hadn't objected, that would have passed right now. The president could have signed it tonight. The paychecks could have gone out right now for every man and woman in the Coast Guard. So if you're serving in the Coast Guard in any of our 50 states, let me say, number one, thank you for your service. Thank you for your heroism. Thank you for the amazing difference you make. You deserve to be paid. You will be paid. But if you want to know why you weren't paid, it is because the Democratic leader objected to your getting a paycheck. It is my hope that the Democratic senators will go to their leader and say, this is a bad idea for Democratic senators to hold hostage the paychecks of the men and women of the Coast Guard. We should pay the Coast Guard And that ought to be something that commands unanimous bipartisan support. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Madam President. Senator from Alaska.
This is about the 2016 election. Period. For the Democrats, this is about the fact that Donald Trump beat their girl, the sea hag Hillary Clinton. This is about he brought to the American people a message that defeated them. And the idea that they can continue to allow him to enact different parts of the campaign promises that he made. He promised tax reform. He has tax reform. He promised to get rid of Obamacare. Obamacare is now unconstitutional. If you missed that, I'm sorry. But Obamacare is now unconstitutional. He promised to turn the economy around. We have the best economy that we've seen in more than two decades. We have the best job market we've seen ever. Lowest black unemployment, lowest Hispanic unemployment rates on record. For months we had more job openings than we had people applying for jobs or looking for work. All of those were campaign promises. We're winning on trade. China is getting ready to spend $1 trillion to buy U.S. goods to reset the trade deficit to zero. They haven't been able to stop anything. This is the only thing left, and it's his big promise that they can stop. If they give him anything for that wall, Trump will have defeated them completely, and they will not stand for that. It's not about you. They'll cut off the Coast Guard. If they will let me help you out with this. If the Democrats will not fund the Coast Guard's paychecks in order to defeat Trump, do you really think they give a rat's behind about you? You're not risking your life to keep America safe. If they'll do that to those who are out there on the high seas to try to protect people, to help people, and to guard our borders at sea, if they will basically throw them under the bus just for a chance to defeat Trump, what do you think they'll do to you? And you got 2 weeks to figure out the answer, because there's going to be another showdown, if not shutdown. And if Donald Trump does what I think is probably the most prudent, he'll declare a national emergency, and then we'll see all this in the court. He also could shut down the government again, like he said he would 1 week ago. We have 2 weeks to go. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to my good friend Ron Edwards, and afterward we will be back with hour 2 of Black Man Thinking.
A great American history maker finally gets the recognition she deserves. Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. On today's page from the Edwards Notebook, Dr. Gladys West, one of the 4 hidden figures featured in the movie Hidden Figures, recently was given formal recognition for her inventive genius behind the development of the global positioning systems. The 87-year-old genius mathematician, one of 4 black American women portrayed in the Hidden Figures movie, joined an elite group of professionals recently recognized by the Air Force Space Command. She was also publicly honored for her tremendous work as a member of a team of all-black professionals who did computing for the United States military before electronic systems were available. West and her black American colleagues excelled to the heights of intellectual achievement. They did not allow Jim Crow Democrat bigots to deter them from reaching their God-given potential of greatness. Congratulations, Dr. Gladys West, and all the one-time hidden figures who chose the high road of greatness over the low trail of bitterness often exhibited by many individuals today who only have themselves to blame for their self-induced lack of achievement. I'm Ron Edwards. Join me Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific on SHR Media, AmericaMatters.us, and 12 a.m. Sundays on Talk America Radio Network.
Ron Edwards, the new voice of America.
Sponsored by the Tri-County Liberty Coalition.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it's made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinkin here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1, FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5, North Florida Talk Radio. Freedom in America Radio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. When it comes to the Democrat Party and its platform, we are seeing increasingly and almost exclusively that platform has two planks. One is abortion, the other is socialism. First, let's talk about abortion, which is just very interesting. The state of Washington recently went through an exercise where they Trump-proofed, as they called it, their abortion laws. Seattle Times came out with an article back in August 15th, which laid out the prescription that they took, which is simply, we're going to make our laws such that it doesn't matter whether or not there's a Roe v. Wade. We will be able to continue to murder children in the womb the way Roe v. Wade allows us to now. That is pretty much the same prescription that New York recently took in saying we're going to stand up for women and kill children. I'm not exactly sure how those two go together, how you stand up for women and subsequently kill children, but I'm not a progressive. But New York did the same thing, and of course that was roundly criticized. And then in Virginia, something that was kind of shunted aside with all the drama about 35-year-old pictures was the law that they tried to pass in Virginia, where they basically went as far as saying a living child could be delivered from the mother. In other words, it's no longer part of her body. But then she and the doctor could get together and make a decision and yet kill the child, and that would be part of abortion. Here is how Virginia delegate Kathy Tran defended or answered questions about that bill last week in the House of Delegates chamber in Virginia.
How late in the third trimester could a physician perform an abortion if he indicated it would impair the mental health of the woman?
Or physical health.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm talking about the mental health.
So, through the third trimester. The third trimester goes all the way up to 40 weeks.
Okay. But to the end of the third trimester.
Yep, I don't think we have a limit in the bill.
So, where it's obvious that a woman is about to give birth, she has physical signs that she is about to give a birth, would that still be a point at which she could request an abortion if she was so certified? She's dilating.
Mr. Chairman, that would be a decision that the doctor, the physician, and the woman would make at that point.
I understand that. I'm asking if your bill allows that.
My bill would allow that, yes.
So while the child is coming through the uterus, coming through the birth canal, trying to be born, you can still just abort it. I don't know if that's abortion at that point. I don't know how that's not infanticide. And the governor of Virginia, in defending it, brought out the idea that you could have fully delivered the child and still kill the child. And that was okay among the Democrat Party in Virginia. Now, having a 35-year-old picture of you in blackface or wearing a Klan outfit, that's a problem. But taking children out of the womb and killing them is okay. That gives you an idea of what the Democrat platform is. On the 30th of January, a young lady appeared on the Tucker Carlson program, and he wanted to ask her, or tried to ask her, her position on just the law that was going on in Virginia, and you saw the rabid defense of womb murder, that's what I called it, and the deflection onto other things as part of that defense.
Monica Klein is a founding partner at Seneca Strategy. She joins us today. Monica, thanks a lot for coming on.
Yeah.
I'm sure you describe yourself as pro-choice. I bet a lot of people watching right now think of themselves as pro-choice. So I'm not attacking you for that. But I wonder what you think of what Dr. Northam, the governor of Virginia, just said, that when a child, he described the child as an infant, is born, there's a point where the mother and the physician can decide whether to kill the infant or not. What do you think of that?
Look, Tucker, I understand that you want to go back to a time where Roe v. Wade was illegal, where women were having back alley abortions, and they were using coat hangers to have abortions, which is actually what's barbaric.
I'm giving you time to make a real argument. I'm not arguing for the repeal of Roe v. Wade. I'm a very straightforward person.
That is what you're essentially saying.
Actually, no, that's not what I'm arguing. And please don't be tiresome. The governor of Virginia, who's a rising star in the Democratic Party, just said this. There's pending legislation that mirrors it, and I'm asking you what you think of it. That's it. I'm not here to debate Roe v. Wade.
I think that right now, reproductive health care is under attack by the Republican Party. 72% of Americans support the right to choose, and yet we have Trump and we have sexual predator Kavanaugh trying to repeal Roe v. Wade and trying to take away our control over our own bodies. This isn't about babies. This is about health care. This is about you attempting to control women's bodies.
Okay, please don't be a robot. Monica, you're smarter than that. This is the governor of Virginia just saying this. I just want to know what you think of it. Is that okay? Does that bother you? It's a sincere question. This just happened.
Okay, it bothers me that you are attempting to control women's bodies.
That's what you're doing.
You are. The Republican Party right now is working overtime to repeal Roe v. Wade and to take away choice in every single state.
I wonder if you think you're convincing anybody, or if your unwillingness to address what just happened today on tape that we just played is a sign that you can't defend this. And if you can't defend it, I wonder why that is. Have you paused to ask yourself, as an American, as a person, what do I, as a woman, what do I think of that?
As a woman, what do I think of it? Have you asked yourself why you spend so much time talking about this rather than thinking about why your party is trying to repeal Roe v. Wade and control women's bodies? Right now, there are 7 states where there's only 1 abortion clinic. Okay, there are 4 states with trigger bans where we would, if Roe v. Wade is repealed, women cannot get reproductive health care. This is about a woman's right to choose, and you, as a man, should not have a single say in that.
Wow. Do you think that you're making a case that most people agree with, that it's okay to abort a child in the 3rd trimester
Tucker,
for
you
no...
can keep trying to put words in my mouth and keep trying to say that the Democratic Party is hurting children. But your party is the one that is tearing families apart at the border and allowing children to die in federal custody. So whose party is actually harming children?
Wow. Let me just ask you one quick question. I mean, this is obviously a pointless conversation. And I think less of you after, I have to say.
I already think less of you, so don't.
It's an honest question. Have you thought about it? Do you have a real answer to what the governor of Virginia said, or are you going to throw yet another talking point at me? I mean, have you actually thought about it? Will you answer that question at all?
I have thought about it, and I am telling you that your party is attempting to change the conversation about Roe v. Wade and take control of women's bodies. I'm sorry that as a man, what you're focused on is controlling women's bodies, but we will not allow you to do that.
This is a child who's been born. This is not a woman's body. This is an independent person.
It just confuses me why you pretend that you have concerns over children when you're completely fine with ICE tearing families apart and children dying in federal custody.
Monica, thank you. I appreciate it.
Controlling a woman's body Let me see if I get this straight. If you keep a child that has been born from being killed by the woman and a physician, that is controlling the woman's body. Okay. And let's throw out the little stat she had that 72% actually support abortion. Really? Then why are literally half the states, if not more, I think it's more than half the states, are doing their best to restrict abortion through the legislative process, which means somebody had to vote for these people. If 72% of Americans agree with abortion, it must be the 72% in the other states, because it's obviously not 72% in a place like Ohio, where they're trying to get rid of abortion altogether, in Mississippi where they're restricting it, or in Texas where they have effectively restricted it. She did say in 7 states there's only one abortion provider. If 72% of Americans agreed that abortion was a good thing or something that they wanted to have, that wouldn't be the case. She's lying, and she's obfuscating so that she can push the position of abortion, because that is what the Democratic Party stands upon. That's one of their main platforms. The other one is socialism. Wasn't always that way, and even somewhat recently it wasn't quite that way. Go back to November 2015, when Bernie Sanders was actually pulling the Democrat Party willingly, I would say, because it was either him or Hillary Clinton. I'm like, oh well. But pulling them in the direction of socialism by trying to give a definition of quote-unquote democratic socialism.
If we are serious about rebuilding the American middle class, if we are serious about reinvigorating American democracy, we need to develop a political movement which once again is prepared to take on and defeat a ruling class whose greed is destroying our nation. So let me take this opportunity to define for you, simply and straightforwardly, what democratic socialism means to me. It means building on what Franklin Delano Roosevelt said when he fought for guaranteed economic rights for all Americans. And it builds on what Martin Luther King Jr. said in 1968 when he stated, and I quote, "This country has socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the poor," end of quote. My view of democratic socialism builds on the success of many other countries around the world who have done a far better job than we have in protecting the needs of their working families, their elderly citizens, their children, their sick, and their poor. Democratic socialism means that we must reform a political system which is corrupt, that we must create an economy that works for all, not just the very wealthy.
It means a bunch of platitudes. It means a bunch of things that were never true. FDR's New Deal failed. 8 years after the New Deal went into effect, unemployment was higher in the United States than anywhere else in the developed world. It didn't work. The rest of the world had recovered from the Depression enough to start a war, and the U.S. was still looking at double-digit unemployment. And only we had the New Deal. Germany had been stuck paying reparations, and they were able to initiate a war because they recovered under Hitler. But the New Deal left us with double-digit unemployment. And the U.S. economy didn't turn around again until we actually ramped up the World War II war machine in our economy. what did he say it was? We need a movement, really? Okay. Well, fast forward 3+ years, and you ended up with that movement as socialism is engulfing and reshaping the Democrat Party.
Socialism is pulling the Democrats apart. Far-left candidates are pushing towards the center of power and pushing the party into what I think are uncharted waters. California, it is pure financial lunacy. Can we get that clear? Democrat Gavin Newsom, running for governor, wants to give full medical care to all illegal immigrants. California is a sanctuary state. So if you're sick anywhere in the world and you just manage to get 1 foot across the state line, you're home free. Tough on California taxpayers and businesses, but who cares? The left is on the march. In Florida, Andrew Gillum is the Democrats' far-left candidate for governor. Now, he's a young guy, and he was supported by another young socialist, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Free college, abolish ICE, Medicare for all, and, of course, impeach Trump. Standard stuff from the socialists, but the candidate has made it to the final of the Florida governor's race. That's incredible. In New York, the avowedly socialist Cynthia Nixon scored a lot of points in her debate with Governor Cuomo last night. She probably won't win, but she's dragged New York Democrats way over to the left. Cuomo called ICE a bunch of thugs. In New Jersey, the far left has already won. Democrat Governor Murphy has raised taxes in a state which already pays some of the highest taxes in the land. So, in 4 major states, the far left is mounting a serious challenge to the old guard Democrat establishment. Will this fly with voters? I don't think so. The problem is money. The socialists have not spelled out just how much it's all going to cost. They ought to be honest. Tell us, how much are we going to have to pay for you? All the pundits say the Democrats win back the House in November. I'm not so sure about that. Do you really want to pick up the tab for these pie-in-the-sky socialist dreamers?
Well, that was back in August, and as you know, Ocasio-Cortez won. Gavin Newsom is now governor of California. Cynthia Nixon did succeed in pulling Democrats in New York further left as they passed a very liberal abortion law. So, Andrew Gillum, thankfully, was beaten, but only after voter and election fraud failed in Florida. He wasn't going to win, but the effort to cheat made that election close. Very, very close. And in that report, Stu Varney brought up the idea of, well, you know, what about how much this costs? That is the one thing that Democrats cannot expound upon. It's about as murky as Sanders' definition of democratic socialism. As a matter of fact, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez went so far as to dodge the question entirely when payment came up.
Your platform has called for various new programs, including Medicare for all, housing as a federal right, a federal jobs guarantee, tuition-free public college, canceling all student loan debt. According to nonpartisan and left-leaning studies friendly to your cause, including the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities or the Tax Policy Center, the overall price tag is more than $40 trillion in the next decade. You recently said in an interview that increasing taxes on the very wealthy plus an increased corporate tax rate would make $2 trillion over the next 10 years. So where's the other $38 trillion going to come from?
Well, one of the things that we need to realize when we look at something like Medicare for all would save the American people a very large amount of money. And what we see as well is that these systems are not just pie in the sky. Many of them are accomplished by every modern civilized democracy in the Western world. The United Kingdom has a form of single-payer health care. Canada, France, Germany. What we need to realize is that these investments are better and they are good for our future. These are generational investments, so that they're not short-term Band-Aids, but they are really profound decisions about who we want to be as a nation and how we want to act as the wealthiest nation in the history of the world.
Right. No, I get that, but the price tag for everything that you've laid out in your campaign is $40 trillion over the next 10 years. I understand that Medicare for All would cost more to some wealthier people and to the government and to taxpayers, while also reducing individual health care expenditures. But I'm talking about the overall package. You say it's not pie in the sky, but $40 trillion is quite a bit of money. And the taxes that you talked about raising to pay for this, to pay for your agenda, only count for 2. And we're going by left-leaning analysts.
Right. Well, when you look again at how our health care works, currently we pay much of these costs go into the private sector. So what we see is, for example, a year ago, I was working downtown in a restaurant. I went around and I asked, how many of you folks have health insurance? Not a single person did, because they would have had to pay $200 a month for a payment for insurance that had an $8,000 deductible. What these represent are lower costs overall for these programs. And additionally, what this is a broader agenda. We do know and we acknowledge that there are political realities. They don't always happen with just the wave of a wand, but we can work to make these things happen. And in fact, when you look at the economic activity that it spurs, for example, if you look at my generation, millennials, the amount of economic activity that we do not engage in, the fact that we delay purchasing homes, that we don't participate in the economy and purchasing cars, etc., as fully as possible, is a cost. It is an externality, if you will, of unprecedented amounts of student loan debt.
I'm assuming I'm not going to get an answer for the other $38 trillion, but we'll have you back and maybe we can go over that.
No, and you're never going to get an answer for the other $38 trillion. Remember, $40 trillion worth of programs, and only 5% of it she can figure out how to pay for by taking more money from the American people that they earn. That is her solution. That takes care of 5%. The other 95%, well, we just have to realize that we're doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. The healthcare system in the healthcare system in Britain and Canada is coming apart. It's not an example of anything that you want to follow, no more than other people would like to follow Social Security in this country once you look at the unfunded liabilities, which are higher than the national debt. People, you really got to get this thing through your head. This stuff is not great. And that was candidate Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, now Congresswoman. The Democrats are socialists, increasingly. And all they want is the opportunity to use your money against you and to kill your children in the womb. They have no other platform. They have no other program. And if you don't stand up against it, then you're going to be enslaved. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin'. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. So here's another subject that I hope to be done with after this broadcast. The first one was the nonsense in Virginia about Ralph Northam, whom I believe is a racist, but not because of pictures from 35 years ago. I believe he's a racist, demonstrated that on camera in 2013 after a political debate on television where he ignored his black competitor, his opponent in the race, when at the end of the debate he tried to shake his hand and he just acted like the man did not even exist. That proves racism to me more than what happened 35 years ago. Don't even care about that. This other story has to do with the liar known as Jussie Smollett. Yes, I'm calling him right now a liar. Here's why. On the 29th of January, at sometime after 2 o'clock in the morning, we have the report that someone attacked the black homosexual actor who plays an openly homosexual character on the show Empire.
Empire's Jussie Smollett, claiming he was viciously beaten by two men who put a noose around his neck and covered him in bleach in what would be, quite clearly, a racist and homophobic hate crime.
Jussie was in Chicago last night, and around 2 a.m. he went out to get some food. He walked into a Subway, and when he walked out of the store, there were two white men in ski masks.
One yells, "Aren't you that gay slur, Empire, N-word?"
They jumped him, broke ribs, they poured bleach on him, put a noose around his neck.
Jussie fights back, and as the attackers flee, we're told they screamed, "This is MAGA country," and then Jussie walked himself to the hospital.
The one thing we don't know is whether they were following him.
They have to be. They have the bleach, they have the noose.
It's premeditated.
Was it premeditated against Jussie specifically, or were they looking for anybody who's black or gay?
They shoot Empire in Chicago. And 8 days ago at the Fox studios in Chicago, they got a letter addressed to Jussie
saying, "You will die black gay slur," with a childish drawing of a lynching and a scrawled return address that just said MAGA. Can't say with certainty that it's connected to the beating, but here's a fact.
Jussie is not just an actor. He's a tremendous voice for LGBT rights, for African American rights. An attack on him like this, it's also an attack on what he stands for.
Empire creator Lee Daniels.
Jussie, you are my son. We are united on United Front. And no racist can come in and do the things that they did to you.
I have seen a lot of hate crimes in my day, but in 2019, a noose around somebody's neck, I don't know. It's just, ew.
No words for it. The only good news, Jussie should be okay, at least physically.
TMZ, that was a TMZ report. They should be ashamed of themselves. They have embarrassed themselves with their quote unquote reporting. Of course, they're not really a news organization, but they play one on the internet, so to speak. So what we're supposed to believe is that Jussie Smollett, because he says so, that he went to a Subway at 2 o'clock in the morning, and when he came out, two people, now they're calling it a racist and a homophobic attack, so we had to assume that the people who attacked him were of a different race. Well, that's interesting. Two guys in ski masks. Okay, that's convenient, because now you can't give a description to the police. Well, if they were wearing, everything is an if here, and the ifs are increasingly implausible. Let's get away from the TMZ reporting, because that was, you got to understand that Harvey Levin and his crew are somewhere to the left of Mao Zedong. They're as objective as CNN is about Donald Trump. That's where they are. And you just have to understand that. They're not telling the truth. They're giving an opinion, and it's a biased opinion, openly biased, as they discuss it amongst themselves on their broadcast. Funny, funny, funny. The Today Show, or Today.com, came out on the 31st, and they had additional reporting on this whole thing with Smollett. And they talked about the persons of interest who were found on videotape.
Jussie Smollett, one of the stars of the hit show Empire, is still recovering from that alleged attack. Overnight, police providing us with the first look at two people who may have more information about what happened. This morning, Chicago police are asking the public's help in identifying the two people of interest seen here. The duo, captured on surveillance video, is wanted for questioning in an alleged attack on actor Jussie Smollett, who stars on the hit TV show Empire.
But for now, I'm going to protect you.
You can find the monsters?
Yeah, especially from the monsters.
Police saying on Twitter, while video does not capture an encounter, detectives are taking this development seriously and wish to question individuals as more cameras are being reviewed. Police say they have poured over hundreds of hours of video so far. Authorities say Smollett told them 2 men wearing ski masks assaulted him near his downtown apartment building early Tuesday, placed a thin rope around his neck, and poured a substance on him. Authorities say the actor was still wearing the rope and shirt when officers arrived at his apartment.
What was alleged done here, as the police are working on this, has no place in the city of Chicago.
A Chicago PD official tells NBC News there is surveillance video of Smollett at a Subway restaurant where he told them he'd gone before the alleged assault. Police also say they advised Smollett to seek medical treatment for his injuries, which he apparently did. Chicago police revealed they sent this troubling letter to the FBI. It was addressed to the star, contains ethnic and homophobic slurs, and was delivered last week to the studio where Empire is produced. Well wishes for Smollett continue to pour in on social media, from celebrities like John Legend and Ariana Grande to former Vice President Joe Biden. His Empire co-star Taraji P. Henson also sending her support, tweeting, "I wish what happened to my baby was just one bad joke, but it wasn't, and we all feel his pain right now. Jussie Smollett is pure love to the bone." Empire's production has been halted because of the bitterly cold weather here in Chicago. There's no word yet on whether production will resume today. In the meantime, Smollett is scheduled to perform at a club in West Hollywood this Saturday night.
Now we're approaching actual news reporting. The bitter cold in Chicago. When Jussie Smollett alleges he was attacked, the weather was frightful. It was single digits, according to timeanddate.com, reporting for the weather in Chicago on the 29th of January. At 1:53 in the morning, it was 9 degrees outside with a 12-mile-an-hour wind. At 2:53, so I'm bracketing the attack between, it was 2 o'clock, between 1:53 and 2:53. At 2:53, it was 8 degrees. So, yeah, it was cold, and it's colder now, and it even got colder in Chicago that day. But so what you want me to believe is that Jussie is just out there at 2 o'clock in the morning at a Subway, and we got video of that. We have video of him doing that. We have video of him coming into his apartment. We have video of 2 guys passing by later on. We do not have video of him being attacked. Why does that matter? Because Chicago is the most surveilled city in these United States. They have a camera count that the ACLU has called frightening. And that was back in 2013 when the ACLU said the number of surveillance cameras in Chicago is frightening because you can't do anything without the government seeing what you're doing. It is a camera count that, according to the New York Times this past May, they put that number at 30,000 cameras. 30,000 cameras in Chicago. So they saw Jussie Smollett come into his apartment with this quote-unquote thin rope around his neck. They saw him at the Subway. They saw him everywhere but being attacked. And they saw all kinds of people but nobody coming in contact with Jussie Smollett. He's lying. It's really that simple. He's lying. Today, actually went further with him, with Jussie Smollett, reporting on his return to the stage in Los Angeles a few days after his alleged attack.
Jussie Smollett is opening up and sharing new details about the alleged attack. The actor and singer performing for a sold-out crowd here in Los Angeles as questions swirl about the persons of interest.
I'm okay.
Singing proud and speaking out.
I have so many words on my heart that I want to say.
An emotional Jussie Smollett on stage and opening up about his ordeal.
I'm not fully healed yet, but I'm going to, and I'm going to stand strong with y'all.
This photo, taken Tuesday, shows Smollett hours after he says 2 men attacked him, shouting racist and homophobic slurs.
I was bruised, but my ribs were not cracked.
Smollett addressing his supporters and the chorus of doubters who have questioned his account.
There's a lot that I haven't been able to say. Just because there's been a lot of stuff that has been said about me that's absolutely not true.
Chicago police releasing this image showing two people of interest around the time Smollett says he was attacked. Authorities say Smollett told them two men wearing ski masks assaulted him, poured a chemical substance on him, and placed a rope around his neck. Detectives say security cameras inside Smollett's building showed a rope around his neck, but he otherwise appeared normal and didn't tell security about an assault.
But for now, I'm going to protect you.
Even from the monsters?
Yeah, especially from the monsters.
Police say Smollett declined to let them examine his phone, which the actor says he was using at the time of the incident.
He's been very cooperative. You know, our job is to investigate the allegations and bring the individuals in. We have no reason to think he's not being genuine with us.
Authorities have yet to uncover any surveillance video of the alleged attack, but the investigation is ongoing. At the concert, Smollett had this message for his fans.
Take love back, because it's the only thing that we have, and I really genuinely mean that from the bottom of my heart.
Jussie Smollett back on stage and embracing the spotlight.
No arrests have been made in this case, but Chicago police say their investigation remains open as they look for those two people of interest. Guys, back to you.
All right, Miguel, thank you.
Yeah, they're still investigating. Chicago police have at least 12 detectives on this case, and they can't find anything. 30,000 cameras in Chicago, government-controlled cameras, government-operated, and they can find him at Subway, they can find him in his building, they can't find anybody coming near him at 2 o'clock in the morning to beat him. Why? Because he's lying. Jussie Smollett would have you believe that white folks roam the streets at just itching for some homosexual person of color to emerge from a sandwich shop. He wants you to believe that they carry thin rope and bleach and yell things like, "This is MAGA country," in sub-freezing temperatures at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday in Chicago. 30,000 video cameras, and nobody sees this. And what they have are persons of interest. You couldn't pick those two. You couldn't even pick the images out of a lineup. They are that nondescript. And there's no evidence of a street attack of any kind except his word. Now, I don't know whether he's trying to cover for an abusive boyfriend or some male prostitute encounter that went wrong. There is a report that circulated on some place called The Advocate, which says he was at a club that night, he was a VIP, and he was, or the name of the club was VIP, and he was acting strangely in that he hit on somebody's boy, he hooked up with somebody's boyfriend, and then the boyfriend and some of their friends followed him out and beat him up. Now, that makes more sense to me, because why would you get beaten, have somebody put a rope around your neck, and you walk into your building where you live and you don't even tell security that you've been attacked? Nobody asked you about the rope? Is it normal for you to walk in and with a rope around your neck that nobody would ask you about it? Security wouldn't ask you about it? Seriously? But for me, the most ridiculous part of this is listening to all the quote-unquote black people who are going through all manner of pretzel logic trying to defend this foolishness. And this is what I mean. They are saying, well, the investigation is ongoing, and until the police say that Jussie is not telling the truth, we're not going to ever say he's lying. Stop right there. The same people who believe that every cop with a pulse lies about black men is now saying they can't believe a black man is lying unless the police say so. You can't make this stuff up. Unless, of course, you're Jussie Smollett. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us, also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of the show. Well, it looks like maybe they're starting to do something about voter fraud in the state of Texas. I know that if you talk to Democrats, they want to dismiss voter fraud and election fraud, even though it was front and center in the midterm elections, particularly in Florida's statewide races, including for governor and the Senate. It was front and center in Georgia. It was front and center in multiple states. It was front and center in California. It was front and center in Montana and Kansas. However, you do have to deal with the idea with Democrats, which is a lie, that they keep saying there is no voter fraud. Voter fraud isn't widespread. It's not going to have any effect. Really? If that is the case, then why not just eliminate it with voter ID? Oh, voter ID is racist. So are you trying to tell me the same people that can't vote can't open bank accounts? Because I dare you to try to get a bank account open without being able to identify yourself. But you want people to vote without I understand. The other thing, of course, that they say is there's really no no reason to believe that what the amount of voter fraud that may occur, they don't really concede that much is occurring, has any impact on elections. Well, a gentleman, I believe his name is Eric Eggers, appeared on Fox Business Network back in August of 2018, and he seems to have a different opinion.
Joining me now, Eric Eggers. He's research director at the Government Accountability Institute. He's author of the newly released book, Fraud, How the Left Plans to Steal the Next Election. Eric, it's good to have you with us. And voter fraud, we hear the left continue to dismiss the very idea, saying the numbers are too small. It's not a matter that we should worry our little heads about. You found quite a different result.
That's right, Lou, and it's great to be here. At the Government Accountability Institute, we decided, because we're tired of hearing talk about this so-called myth of voter fraud, we want to see what the actual evidence was. So we did an unprecedented look at the national level using all the publicly available voter rolls we could gather, and we hired a data expert and contracted with a commercial database. And what we found was stunning. We found in the state of Florida what appeared to be over 2,100 examples of double voting. That means that 2,100 Floridians cast one ballot in 2016 and then cast a second ballot in a different state. And as I'm sure you and your viewers remember, that's nearly 4 times the margin of victory in the 2000 presidential election. So this idea that voter fraud doesn't occur on a scale to sway significant elections is clearly just not true.
Well, I remember clearly, but much of the audience is too young to remember, Eric, I'm sure. But everybody's aware of one thing. When the Supreme Court starts citing statistics that say that the potential for voter fraud is immense, that is something that we all can focus on clearly and unequivocally. And the number of double state registrations to vote, the number of registered voters outnumbering those who would be eligible to vote because of their age, I mean, it's striking, and it is deeply concerning.
It absolutely is, Lou. The Supreme Court cited statistics, as you noted, that says there's nearly 3 million voter registrations in this country of people who are registered to vote in more than one state. And even the President Obama's own Commission on Election Administration in 2013 noted that 16 million voter registrations are significantly inaccurate or flawed. In some states, it's up to 15% or 1 in 7. And you talk about the issues of nationwide irregularity. There's 248 counties in this nation that have more registered voters than legal residents of voting age. So clearly there's a problem, and this idea that there aren't organized efforts paid for by George Soros to go out and manipulate those exploitations, that's just inconsistent with what I found in my book.
And the fact is that Soros is spending tens of millions of dollars to pursue an election system that would be the envy of the KGB or the SRU. If they're trying to meddle, we have enough people colluding with the Russians in that effort, certainly inspired by George Soros, his money, and the organizations that he is funding.
Yeah, you hear a lot about this idea of Russian collusion. In fact, when I told people I was writing a book on voter fraud, they said, oh, so it's going to be about the Russians, right? And look, we should clearly be concerned about any threat to election security. But I think it's silly to assume that somehow Russians are less concerned about manipulating American political outcomes than the Democrats.
Yeah, I do think, by the way, that we should not only be concerned about it, we should be safeguarding the integrity of these elections. There should be Republicans and Democrats at every polling booth in the country polling place in the country to assure the integrity. But you and I both know that's not going to be sufficient. And these two parties had better be certain this time that they're doing everything they can. Your book will help in that effort. Eric, we thank you for being with us. Come back soon. We'll continue to watch very carefully the issues surrounding the integrity of this election. Very important. Thank you very much, Eric Eggers.
Yeah, it is important. So the data demonstrates that Democrats and progressives are lying. 248 counties with more registered voters than residents who are actually eligible to vote. 248. Wow. But that can't affect anything. More potential voter fraud in Florida than the margin of victory in the 2000 presidential campaign or the election that was held there? Really? No effect whatsoever. You want to say it was hanging chads. You don't want to get into the idea. See, Democrats have been at election fraud for a long time. It's gotten into the culture. The oft-told Chicago refrain to vote early and vote often is by definition voter fraud. John Kennedy likely made it to the White House before he got himself blown away because of voter fraud in Illinois and the Chicago area and in Texas. So that's the 1960 election. They've been at this for longer than a few minutes. And the reason, of course, is clear. They don't believe that they can win a fair contest in America because their thought process, their values don't align with those of the American people. And they haven't for quite some time. And it's not getting any better. At least the alignment is not getting better in any way, shape, or form. Now, Texas, this is interesting because Texas actually determined back in October, a CBS report showed that they found real voter fraud going on there in the form of people being paid as part of a fraud ring.
Women are accused of being part of a paid voter fraud ring in Tarrant County.
Tonight, they face dozens of felony charges connected to mail-in ballots. Jason Allen live in Fort Worth tonight. And Jason, this goes back to the primary election in 2016.
Right, Gilma, and that spring there were more than 16,000 ballots that were mailed in here to the Tarrant County Election Center. Now investigators believe that for some of those ballots, voters hadn't asked for them, they hadn't filled them out, and they didn't know that somebody else did.
While voters were picking presidential candidates at the polls in 2016, ballots sent in by mail in Tarrant County had what investigators now believe were fraudulent signatures and information.
It doesn't match up. This was an accepted ballot.
Political consultant Aaron Harris found a paper trail that he handed over to state investigators that helped lead to nearly 30 felony counts against 4 women. The women, including Letitia Sanchez and Letitia Tepichin, are accused of requesting ballots for elderly voters, forging signatures, filling those ballots out, and mailing them in.
So the harvesters sit around and fill these out by the hundreds, often by the thousands.
Back in 2016, Governor Greg Abbott posted on Twitter about the fraud investigation in Tarrant County. And while the Attorney General's office referred to the indictments as part of a paid ring, they would not comment on if there would be more charges to come. Harris told us his own research has turned up many more people involved, but recognized the cases are difficult to prosecute.
And just because they may have only been indicted on 1 or 10 or 16 counts doesn't mean they don't have 200 counts, but those are the only 16 that can be proven.
The indictment shows that, at least in these cases, many of the ballots involved were for Democratic candidates. I talked to the Tarrant County Democratic Party chair tonight. She had met one of the women who was involved, but really didn't know the details of the case. And she also questioned the timing of these indictments just a few weeks before the November midterm elections. Live in Fort Worth tonight, Jason Allen, CBS 11 News.
People filling out ballots, fake ballots, absentee mail-in ballots by the thousands. Do you really want to understand why the Democrat Party wants things like motor voters, same-day registration, absentee ballots being used by people who are not absent, mail-in ballot, all this stuff is because they want to practice voter fraud. It's really that simple. Because now I have all the ballots I need to sway an election the way I want. because these people didn't vote on Election Day. And now, since it's a matter of paperwork, we all know what the government can do with paperwork. Despite all this, in Texas says, we found it and we're going to address it. Here is their idea of addressing voter fraud. This is from a 25 January report on a local station in Texas.
A year-long evaluation by the Texas Secretary of State's office uncovers thousands of cases of potential voter fraud. KVUE political reporter Ashley Godot is here to talk about what they found. Ashley?
Well, Quita, today the Secretary of State sent notices to voter registrars across Texas about this. Now, his office staff say about 95,000 people who the Texas Department of Public Safety classify as non-U.S. citizens have a matching voter registration record, and that about 58,000 of them have voted in one or more Texas elections. That's the big headline that you've probably seen, but there's more to this. Like I said, this notice was sent out, and it explains the way DPS and the Secretary of State's office came to this conclusion. When non-citizens went to get a driver's license or an ID card, they have to show documentation to DPS that they are in the U.S. lawfully. A list of those names was compared to the people who are registered to vote, and they found about 95,000 matches. Of those matches, about 58,000 voted. Now, starting tomorrow, the Secretary of State will send the names of these people to voter registrars. But it's important to note the notice tells the registrars that the list of names should be treated as, quote, weak matches, meaning the county may choose to investigate the voter or take no action. So what all this means is, yes, 95,000 people were flagged, but that doesn't mean for sure that all those people committed voter fraud. But remember, you do have to be a U.S. citizen in order to vote.
We found 95,000 illegals who are registered and 58,000 of them voted, and we're going to tell registrars across the state about this. And you really don't necessarily have to take any action. This is your idea of how to deal with a problem? Here is the thing. The idea that voting is a right is odd. There are requirements. There are conditions that people must meet in order to vote. And that is what triggers the privilege of voting. We have perverted this into thinking that you have an absolute right to cast a ballot. You don't. And because we have categorized it as a right and not really sought to keep people who shouldn't be voting from voting, that is why you have the potential for so much fraud. You saw what it did in 2018. The way they will defeat Trump, if Trump is defeated, is not because they have a good candidate. Have you seen their field? They are going to do it by simply the same thing they did in Orange County, California, where you have a decidedly Republican electorate that now has no Republican representation in Congress. And they voted for the Republican governor who got killed statewide. He won in Orange County, but none of their congressional candidates won. Guys, you're going to have to step up and do something about this if you want the country to continue without going into another civil war. It's up to you. And that's our show. God bless you. May God keep you. My prayer always. And until next week, do take care.
You've been listening to Black Man Thinkin' with your host, Stan Levy. Join Stan midnight to 2 a.m. That's late Monday night into early Tuesday morning. And find him on the web at Black Man Thinkin' without the G. That's blackmanthinkin.com.